During a lavish party, the paralyzed son of a millionaire cried non-stop, even surrounded by doctors and specialists. Nothing seemed to work until the caretaker's daughter, with a simple gesture, crossed the garden. She brought no medicine, but what she did surprised everyone. Robert Thornton stood frozen by the poolside of his Greenwich, Connecticut estate, watching helplessly as his 4-year-old son Ethan wailed inconsolably. The lavish summer garden party continued around them, but the sound of his child's distress cut through the orchestral quartet, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the polite laughter of New England's elite. 3 weeks earlier, in a sterile room at Boston Children's Hospital, a specialist had delivered the news that had shattered their world. Ethan had been diagnosed with Emery-Dreifuss muscular dystrophy, a rare progressive condition with no known cure. "Mr. Thornton," a waiter approached tentatively, "the guests are asking if everything is all right." Robert's jaw tightened. As CEO of Thornton Stone and Marble, one of America's largest luxury construction material suppliers, he was accustomed to solving problems with money and influence. But his billions had proven useless against his son's condition. He dismissed the waiter with a wave. "It's fine, Catherine," he called to his wife, who was hurrying toward them in her designer gown. "We'll manage." Catherine Thornton's perfectly styled blonde hair swayed as she knelt beside her son, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "Ethan, sweetheart, please. Mommy's important friends are here." But Ethan only cried harder, his little body shaking. The boy had hardly stopped crying since the diagnosis. Despite transforming the east wing of their mansion into a state-of-the-art medical facility and flying in specialists from Switzerland, nothing calmed him. It was as if the child could sense the heaviness of his prognosis hanging over the family. Robert looked past the Olympic-sized pool to the sprawling gardens where caterers bustled and string lights twinkled against the approaching dusk. This party was meant to distract them, to create an illusion of normalcy. Instead, it only highlighted how fractured their perfect life had become. "Should I call Dr. Hoffman?" Catherine whispered, referring to the live-in physician they'd hired at an exorbitant salary. Before Robert could answer, a small figure darted across the manicured lawn, weaving between startled guests in expensive attire. Emma Hayes, the 7-year-old daughter of their groundskeeper, rushed toward Ethan with determined steps. Her simple sundress and untamed curls stood in stark contrast to the polished appearances surrounding her. "Emma!" John Hayes called after his daughter, emerging from the direction of the staff quarters, his weathered face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thornton. She got away from me." But Robert barely heard him. He was transfixed by what was happening. Emma had plopped down on the travertine tile beside Ethan, seemingly oblivious to the social boundaries she was crossing. She pulled a slightly misshapen cookie from her pocket. "My mom made these," she said simply, offering it to Ethan. "They're chocolate chip with a secret ingredient, love." The entire party seemed to hold its breath. Ethan's sobs quieted as he studied the girl and her offering. After weeks of refusing specialized meals prepared by their private chef, he reached out with trembling fingers and accepted the cookie. "I know what it's like to be sad," Emma continued, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. "When I'm sad, my grandma tells me stories about brave knights and magical kingdoms where everyone gets better." To the astonishment of everyone watching, Ethan took a bite of the cookie. Then, like the sun breaking through storm clouds, a small smile appeared on his tear-stained face. "Would you like to hear a story?" Emma asked, and Ethan nodded. Catherine's expression shifted from shock to discomfort. "Robert," she hissed, "the groundskeeper's daughter is not appropriate company for—" "Look at him, Catherine," Robert interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. For the first time in weeks, their son wasn't crying. As Emma launched into a tale about a boy who discovered he could talk to animals, Ethan's attention remained fixed on her. The girl gestured wildly, her expressive face bringing the story to life. When she reached a particularly exciting part, Ethan actually giggled, a sound Robert had feared he might never hear again. The garden party resumed around them, but now with curious glances and whispered observations. Robert noticed several of Catherine's socialite friends exchanging disapproving looks, but he couldn't bring himself to care. His son was smiling. John Hayes approached cautiously. "I can take her back to our cottage, sir." "No," Robert said firmly. "Let them be." In the following days, Emma became a regular visitor to the mansion. Catherine initially objected, citing concerns about appropriate playmates and unnecessary exposure to germs, but Robert stood firm. Every afternoon, Emma would arrive with simple toys, drawings, or stories from her grandmother. Unlike the team of child psychologists and specialists who treated Ethan with clinical caution, Emma approached him as just another child. She didn't tiptoe around him or speak in the hushed tones that had become common in their household. She challenged him to crawl after her, to reach for toys, to laugh. "I don't understand it," Dr. Hoffman admitted 2 weeks later during their daily briefing. "His mood has improved dramatically, and we're seeing marginally better results in his physical therapy sessions." "It's the Hayes girl," Robert said, watching through the window as Emma taught Ethan to fold a simple origami bird in the garden. "Well, emotional well-being certainly impacts physiological responses," the doctor acknowledged. "Children who feel secure and happy often demonstrate better outcomes, regardless of their condition." Catherine remained skeptical, particularly when John and Maria Hayes declined Robert's offer of financial compensation for their daughter's time. "We don't want your money, Mr. Thornton," John had said with quiet dignity. "Emma adores your son. This isn't a job to her." As summer progressed, a transformation swept through the Thornton mansion. Laughter echoed down marble hallways that had previously felt like hospital corridors. Emma's visits expanded from afternoons to full days, with the children playing throughout the house. Catherine, despite her initial resistance, found herself drawn to the warmth that had returned to their home. One rainy afternoon, Robert discovered his wife sitting cross-legged on the floor of Ethan's playroom, learning origami alongside the children. The sight of her designer clothes rumpled, her perfect hair falling loose around her shoulders as she laughed at her clumsy attempts to fold paper, touched something deep within him. "I never thought I'd see that again," he confided to Maria Hayes later that day when she came to collect Emma. "My wife laughing like that." Maria smiled knowingly. Children have a way of showing us what truly matters. By mid-August, Ethan's test results showed modest but undeniable improvement. His muscle deterioration had slowed, and his energy levels had increased. Dr. Hoffman cautioned against excessive optimism, but admitted the results were promising. "Whatever you're doing," he told Robert, "keep doing it." What they were doing, Robert realized, was allowing joy back into their lives. Emma's presence had broken through the cloud of fear and grief that had engulfed them since the diagnosis. The simplicity of childhood friendship had accomplished what millions of dollars in medical intervention could not. But as summer waned and Catherine began planning their annual Labor Day gala, the fragile happiness they'd found faced its first serious threat. The invitation list included the most influential families in New England, potential investors, and longtime friends of the Thorntons. "The Hayes girl cannot be present during the gala," Catherine insisted one evening. "It's simply not appropriate, Robert. People will talk." "Let them talk," Robert replied, loosening his tie after a long day at the office. "Have you seen our son lately? He's thriving because of Emma." Catherine's expression softened. "I know that, and I'm grateful. But there are boundaries, Robert. Social realities we can't ignore. Emma can visit the day after. But during the gala, Ethan needs to be with us, presenting a united family front." Robert reluctantly agreed, unaware that this compromise would trigger a crisis that would force them to decide what truly mattered: social standing or their child's happiness. The morning of the Labor Day gala arrived with perfect New England weather, clear blue skies, and a gentle breeze that carried the first hints of autumn. While an army of event planners transformed the Thornton estate into a showcase of opulence, Ethan sat by his bedroom window, watching Emma play with her dog near the groundskeeper's cottage. "He's been sitting there for hours," Catherine told Robert as they reviewed the final preparations for the evening. "Maybe we should reconsider having Emma come for a little while." Robert checked his watch. "The first guests arrive in 4 hours. Let's have John bring her over until then." When Emma arrived, Ethan's entire demeanor changed. His shoulders straightened, his eyes brightened, and he pulled her by the hand to show her his newest toys, expensive gadgets that paled in comparison to the simple pleasures they created together. "My grandma taught me a new story," Emma announced, settling cross-legged on the carpet. "It's about a prince who everyone thought was weak, but he had special powers inside that nobody knew about. Catherine, standing in the doorway, watched as her son listened with rapt attention. Over the past weeks, she'd begun to see Emma differently. The girl possessed an emotional intelligence that belied her age and background. She spoke to Ethan with natural compassion, but never pity, something even the most educated adults in their circle seemed incapable of managing. "Mrs. Thornton." Maria Hayes appeared beside her, carrying a small container. "I brought some of those cookies Ethan likes." Catherine nodded gratefully, noticing how the housekeeper's daughter had the same warm brown eyes as her mother. "Thank you, Maria, and thank you for sharing Emma with us. She's been quite remarkable with Ethan." Maria's smile was tinged with pride. "She has her father's kindness and my mother's storytelling gift. We may not have much, but we've always had love and stories." The simple statement lingered with Catherine as she finished preparing for the gala. She found herself thinking about the Hayes family's modest cottage compared to their 15,000-square-foot mansion. The Hayes had little in terms of material wealth, yet they possessed a richness of spirit that had been absent in the Thornton household until Emma's arrival. By late afternoon, Catherine approached the children with reluctance. "Emma, sweetheart, it's time for you to go home. We're having a special party tonight." Ethan's face fell immediately. "No, I want Emma to stay for the party." "She can't, darling. This is a grown-up event," Catherine explained, avoiding Emma's understanding gaze. "Then I don't want to go either," Ethan declared, his lower lip trembling dangerously. Robert appeared in the doorway, handsome in his tuxedo. "Buddy, it's just for one evening. Emma will be back tomorrow." But Ethan was inconsolable. As Emma was led away by her father, the boys' cries escalated to a level they hadn't heard since before her first visit. Catherine exchanged a worried look with Robert, as Dr. Hoffman was summoned to administer a mild sedative, something they hadn't needed in weeks. "This is exactly why we need proper boundaries," whispered Margaret Whitmore, chairman of the hospital board and Catherine's oldest friend. When she arrived early and witnessed Ethan's distress, "Children from different backgrounds may mean well, but they don't understand our way of life." Catherine nodded absently, but Margaret's words rang hollow. As the evening progressed and she moved through the crowd of New England's elite, Catherine found herself viewing her social circle through new eyes. The conversations seemed shallow, the concerns trivial compared to her son's happiness. From across the grand ballroom, she caught sight of Robert engaged in deep conversation with Dr. James Fitzgerald, a leading researcher in muscular dystrophy from Johns Hopkins. "The emotional component of treatment is critically undervalued," the doctor was saying. "I've seen cases where the trajectory of degenerative conditions changed dramatically based on the patient's psychological state." "That's exactly what we're experiencing," Robert replied eagerly. "Since Emma, our groundskeeper's daughter, began spending time with Ethan, his clinical markers have improved. It defies conventional medical explanation." Catherine noticed Margaret and several other socialites exchanging glances nearby. By morning, the story of the Thorntons allowing their son to fraternize with the Help would be circulating through Greenwich's elite circles. Upstairs, Ethan lay in his bed, sedated but restless. When Catherine checked on him during a brief escape from her hosting duties, she found him clutching a paper crane Emma had made for him. The sight pierced her heart. What good was social standing if her child was miserable? The gala concluded just after midnight, with the last guests departing in a fleet of luxury cars. Catherine found Robert in his study, nursing a glass of scotch. "That was a success," he said wearily. "Fitzgerald is interested in Ethan's case, and the foundation raised nearly $2 million tonight." Catherine sat beside him, kicking off her painful heels. "But at what cost? Our son cried himself to sleep because we wouldn't allow his only friend to stay." Robert set down his glass. "Catherine, you were the one who insisted Emma couldn't attend." "I know," she admitted, "and I'm beginning to think I was wrong." The next morning brought another challenge. Ethan, still upset from the previous evening, refused to eat breakfast or participate in his physical therapy. He sat sullenly by the window, waiting for Emma, who was uncharacteristically late. When John Hayes finally appeared at the service entrance, his expression was apologetic. "Emma won't be coming today, Mr. Thornton. She's upset. She thinks she did something wrong that you don't want her here anymore." Robert felt a surge of guilt. "That's not true at all. Please, bring her. Ethan needs her." "With respect, sir, Emma needs some time too. She cried all night thinking she'd hurt Ethan somehow." John shifted uncomfortably. "Children understand more than we give them credit for. She knows she was sent away because of who she is." The words landed like a physical blow. Robert spent the day distracted at work. While at home, Catherine watched Ethan deteriorate without Emma's presence. By evening, they reached a decision together. "Social expectations be damned," Robert declared. "Our son's happiness comes first." The following morning, Robert and Catherine personally visited the Hayes cottage, a charming but modest home on the edge of their property. Maria opened the door, surprised to find her employers standing on her porch. "We've come to apologize," Catherine said, the words unfamiliar on her tongue. "To all of you, but especially to Emma." The little girl appeared behind her mother, eyes wide with uncertainty. Catherine knelt, her designer pants touching the wooden porch floor. "Emma, we made a mistake. Ethan misses you terribly, and we miss you too. You've brought something special into our home, something all our money couldn't buy." Emma studied Catherine's face with the solemn wisdom of a child who had already learned that the adult world operated by confusing rules. "You didn't want me at your fancy party because I'm not rich like you." Robert winced at her directness. "That was wrong of us, Emma, very wrong, and we're asking for your forgiveness." After a long moment, Emma nodded. "Ethan is my friend. Friends forgive each other." The simple statement carried more maturity than most of the conversations Robert had in corporate boardrooms. When Emma returned to the mansion that afternoon, Ethan's joy was explosive. He threw his arms around her with more strength than his parents had seen him display in months. That evening, Catherine found Robert in Ethan's room, watching the children who had fallen asleep amid a sea of books and toys. Emma's small hand rested protectively over Ethan's. "We almost lost this," Catherine whispered. "For appearances." Robert nodded grimly. "No more. From now on, Emma is welcome anywhere in this house, anytime." True to their word, the Thorntons began including Emma in family activities. When Catherine hosted her weekly ladies' luncheon, Emma sat at the table, carefully mimicking Catherine's perfect posture as she drank apple juice from a crystal glass. Many of the socialites were visibly uncomfortable, but Catherine found she no longer cared. Dr. Hoffman continued to report incremental improvements in Ethan's condition. "His muscle tone is strengthening, particularly in his core and extremities. It's not a cure, but it's far better than the prognosis we initially discussed." As autumn painted the Connecticut landscape in brilliant colors, the children spent hours in the garden, collecting leaves and creating art projects. One afternoon, Maria Hayes taught both children how to make her famous cookies, and Catherine joined them, learning to bake for the first time in her life. "My mother would faint if she could see me now," Catherine laughed, flour dusting her cashmere sweater. Maria smiled. "Some of the best moments in life happen when we forget who we're supposed to be and remember who we are." The unlikely friendship between the children continued to blossom, bringing the two families closer, despite their vastly different backgrounds. John taught Ethan and Emma about the gardens, while Robert found himself enjoying simple conversations with the groundskeeper about fishing and baseball, topics far removed from his usual discussions of market trends and acquisitions. By Thanksgiving, the transformation in the Thornton household was complete. Instead of their traditional catered affair with business associates, they invited the Hayes family to join them for an intimate celebration. Catherine and Maria cooked together, Robert and John watched football, and the children created elaborate place cards for everyone. As they gathered around the table, Robert raised his glass. "To new traditions and to the family we found in unexpected places." Across town, however, the Greenwich social circle Catherine had once dominated buzzed with disapproval. Margaret Whitmore, in particular, viewed the Thorntons' embrace of their staff as a personal affront to the social order. As December approached with its flurry of holiday events, she began orchestrating a plan to remind the Thorntons of their place in society and the Hayes family of theirs. The annual Greenwich Winter Charity Ball was the crown jewel of the holiday social season. Hosted at the historic Riverside Yacht Club, it brought together old money families, corporate elites, and political powerhouses under the guise of philanthropy. This year, Margaret Whitmore had ensured her position as chairwoman, giving her control over every aspect of the prestigious event, including the guest list. "Of course we'll attend," Catherine told Robert as she reviewed the embossed invitation. "We've been major donors for years, and it benefits Boston Children's Hospital, where Ethan receives treatment." Robert nodded absently, watching through his study window as Emma and Ethan built a snowman in the garden. The first heavy snow of December had transformed their estate into a winter wonderland, and the children's laughter carried through the crisp air. "Will Dr. Fitzgerald be there?" he asked, referring to the Johns Hopkins specialist who had shown interest in Ethan's case. "Yes, along with several other researchers we should connect with," Catherine replied. "We should bring Ethan. It would be good for these doctors to see his progress firsthand." What Catherine didn't mention was the conversation she'd had with Margaret the previous day, a carefully orchestrated guilt trip about Ethan missing important social connections with children of his own background. Despite her growing comfort with the Hayes family, Catherine still harbored lingering concerns about Ethan's future in their exclusive social circle. The night of the ball arrived with a fresh snowfall. Catherine had selected a custom midnight blue gown for the occasion, while Robert and Ethan wore matching tuxedos. As they prepared to leave, Ethan asked innocently, "Is Emma coming too?" Catherine knelt beside him, adjusting his bow tie. "Not tonight, sweetheart. This is a special event just for us." "But Emma makes everything more fun," he protested. "Some places are just for family," Catherine explained, ignoring the twinge of guilt as she recalled how easily she now included the Hayes family in other family activities. Upon arrival at the yacht club, they were greeted by the familiar faces of Greenwich society. Catherine noticed several curious glances. Their social reclusiveness over the past months had generated considerable gossip. "Catherine, darling," Margaret air-kissed both cheeks. "And little Ethan. My goodness, you look stronger. Those treatments must be working wonders." Catherine smiled tightly. "It's been a combination of factors." "Of course," Margaret's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, "though I've heard the most interesting rumors about your unconventional approach." Before Catherine could respond, Dr. Fitzgerald approached them, his interest professional rather than social. "Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, I've been reviewing Ethan's recent test results. The improvements are remarkable, particularly for his condition." Robert placed a proud hand on his son's shoulder. "We've found that emotional well-being plays a crucial role. Ethan has formed a special friendship that seems to motivate him." "Ah, yes," Margaret interjected smoothly. "Catherine mentioned your groundskeeper's daughter has been spending time at the house. How charitable of you." The way she emphasized charitable made it clear she viewed the relationship as a form of noblesse oblige rather than a genuine friendship. Catherine felt her cheeks warm with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. Dr. Fitzgerald, oblivious to the social undercurrents, continued enthusiastically. "Emotional connections absolutely impact physical outcomes. I've been advocating for more research into the mind-body connection in muscular dystrophy patients." As the evening progressed, Ethan grew increasingly restless. The ball had a children's area with professional nannies and activities, but Ethan showed little interest in the other children. He kept asking when they could go home to see Emma. During dinner, Margaret had arranged the seating to place the Thorntons with several hospital board members and prominent physicians. As the main course was served, she tapped her glass delicately. "Before we enjoy this wonderful meal, I'd like to recognize some of our most generous supporters. Robert and Catherine Thornton have not only contributed financially to our cause, but have opened their home and hearts to those less fortunate." Catherine tensed, sensing where this was heading. "Their dedication to helping those beneath their station is truly inspiring," Margaret continued with a benevolent smile that didn't reach her eyes. "From their groundskeeper's family to the hospital staff, the Thorntons have shown that charity begins at home." Several guests nodded approvingly, completely missing the passive-aggressive undertones. Catherine's knuckles whitened around her fork as she maintained a pleasant expression. When the dessert course arrived, an elaborate chocolate creation, Ethan eagerly took a large bite. Within minutes, his face flushed and he began to cough. "Ethan?" Catherine touched his forehead, finding it warm. "Are you feeling all right?" He shook his head, tears forming. My tummy hurts. Dr. Hoffman, who attended as the Thorntons' guest, immediately examined him. He's having a mild allergic reaction. Nothing serious, but we should get him home. Allergic? Catherine frowned. To what? He's never had food allergies. The dessert contains hazelnut praline, the yacht club's chef explained when summoned. It's listed on the menu. Catherine hadn't noticed and now felt a stab of maternal guilt. As they prepared to leave early, Margaret approached with exaggerated concern. You poor dears. This is precisely why children need proper supervision and structured environments. Perhaps this is a sign that Ethan requires more professional care than you've been providing. The comment struck like a physical blow. In the car ride home with Ethan dozing in the back seat after taking medication, Catherine remained unusually quiet. You're not listening to Margaret, are you? Robert asked, breaking the silence. She made some points, Robert. We've been so focused on Ethan's happiness that perhaps we've neglected other aspects of his care. What are you talking about? He's thriving. He had an allergic reaction tonight because I wasn't vigilant enough, Catherine said, her voice tight with emotion. And he barely interacted with the other children. What happens when he's older? Will he be able to function in our world if his only friend is Emma? Robert sighed heavily. Catherine, our son is 4 years old and has a serious medical condition. His ability to network with the children of our peers should be the least of our concerns. But the seed of doubt had been planted. When they arrived home, they found Maria Hayes waiting up, having offered to be available if needed. Is he all right? She asked, genuine concern etching her features. Just a mild allergic reaction, Robert explained, carrying the drowsy Ethan. He'll be fine after some rest. That night, as Catherine sat by Ethan's bedside watching him sleep, her thoughts raced. Margaret's words had awakened dormant fears about Ethan's future. What if their unorthodox approach was actually harming him in ways they couldn't see? What if Emma's friendship, while comforting, was preventing him from developing the skills he would need in their social stratum? The next morning, Catherine made a decision. When Emma arrived for her usual visit, Catherine intercepted her at the door. Emma, sweetie, Ethan isn't feeling well today. He needs to rest. The little girl's face fell. Can I sit with him? I'll be quiet. I can tell him a story to make him feel better. Catherine steeled herself. Not today. In fact, I think it might be best if you don't visit for a while. Ethan needs to focus on his medical treatments, and the doctors think he should avoid too much excitement. It was a lie, but Catherine convinced herself it was a necessary one. Emma's eyes filled with tears, and Catherine felt a sharp pang of guilt. Did I do something wrong? Emma asked in a small voice. No, darling. It's just what's best for Ethan right now. When John Hayes came to collect his daughter later, his expression was one of quiet disappointment rather than anger. Emma told me what happened, he said simply. It's nothing personal, Catherine began, but John raised a hand. Mrs. Thornton, we've worked for your family for nearly a decade. I've always respected your privacy and your choices. But those children have formed a bond that's helping your son. Whatever influenced this decision, I hope you'll reconsider. Catherine maintained her composure until she closed the door, then leaned against it, fighting back tears. When Robert learned what she had done, his reaction was explosive. You did what? Without discussing it with me? It's for his own good, Catherine insisted. We need to create more structure, more focus on his medical care. His medical care has improved because of Emma. Are you blind to what's happening here? Their argument was interrupted by the sound of Ethan crying from upstairs. When they reached his room, they found him by the window, watching the Hayes cottage with heart-wrenching sobs. I want Emma, he pleaded. Why can't she come play? Catherine tried to explain about needing rest and following doctor's orders, but Ethan saw through the excuses with a child's piercing clarity. You're lying. You sent Emma away because of the fancy party. The accuracy of his perceptions stunned Catherine. Over the following days, Ethan's condition noticeably deteriorated. He refused physical therapy, barely ate, and spent hours staring silently out the window. Dr. Hoffman reported concerning changes in his vital signs and muscle response. Whatever has changed in his routine, I strongly advise returning to what was working, the doctor said bluntly. He's regressing, and rapidly. Meanwhile, Emma left small gifts in the garden, origami animals, colorful stones, drawings of their adventures together. Each morning, the groundskeeper would discover them while doing his rounds and quietly place them on Ethan's windowsill. Catherine watched her son's spirit dimming and felt the weight of her mistake growing heavier. One evening, she found Robert in the garden, picking up a small paper bird. "From Emma?" she asked unnecessarily. "Yes, John says she makes one every night before bed, hoping Ethan will get better." He turned to face his wife, his expression grave. "This has gone on long enough, Catherine. Our son is suffering because we're prioritizing social appearances over his well-being. I won't stand for it anymore." Catherine looked back at the mansion, their perfect, pristine home that had only felt truly alive when filled with the laughter of two children from vastly different worlds. In that moment, the choice became crystal clear. "You're right," she whispered. "I've been so wrong." The decision made, they both knew there was only one way forward, but reconciliation would not be simple. The damage had been done, trust had been broken, and the innocent hearts of two children hung in the balance. The winter solstice brought the year's longest night and a fresh blanket of snow to Greenwich. In the Thornton mansion, Catherine sat by Ethan's bedside, watching him sleep fitfully. Dark circles had formed under his eyes, and his cheeks had lost their healthy glow. The medical equipment that had been gradually removed during Emma's visits had returned, silent sentinels monitoring his declining condition. "I did this to him," she whispered to Robert, who stood in the doorway. "My pride did this." Robert's anger had softened to a deep sadness. "We can fix it. We have to. What if it's too late? What if Emma won't come back after how I treated her?" "There's only one way to find out." The next morning, Catherine stood before her closet, bypassing her designer clothes for jeans and a simple sweater. She pulled her hair into a ponytail and removed her diamond earrings. Today wasn't about maintaining appearances. It was about humility and truth. The walk to the Hayes cottage seemed longer than ever, each step weighted with remorse. Catherine had never visited their home alone, had never knocked on their door as a supplicant rather than an employer. The sound of her knuckles against the wooden door echoed her pounding heart. Maria opened the door, surprise flickering across her face. "Mrs. Thornton?" "Please call me Catherine," she said, her voice catching. "May I come in? I need to speak with Emma." Maria hesitated, then stepped aside. The cottage interior was modest but exquisitely kept, filled with handmade decorations and family photographs. The scent of freshly baked bread permeated the air, creating a warmth that had nothing to do with the crackling fireplace. Emma sat at a small table, crafting another origami animal. She looked up, her expressive eyes wary. "Hello, Mrs. Thornton," she said formally, so unlike her usual cheerful greeting. Catherine knelt beside her chair, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. "Emma, I've come to apologize. I made a terrible mistake and I'm so sorry." Emma's hands stilled on the paper crane. "You said I couldn't see Ethan anymore. I was wrong. Very wrong. I was worried about things that don't matter. What other people think, what they say about us. But none of that is important compared to the friendship you and Ethan share." Maria watched from the kitchen doorway, her expression guarded yet hopeful. "Is Ethan okay?" Emma asked, concern overriding her hurt. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "No, sweetheart, he's not. He misses you terribly. He's not doing his exercises, not eating well. The doctors say he's getting worse again." Emma's lower lip trembled. "I've been making him presents every day. Daddy puts them on his window." "I know. They're beautiful and Ethan treasures them." Catherine reached for Emma's small hands. "Emma, would you please come back to visit Ethan? Not because I'm asking, but because he needs you. We all do." Emma looked to her mother, seeking guidance. Maria nodded almost imperceptibly. "Will you make me leave again if your fancy friends come?" Emma asked with direct simplicity. The question cut Catherine to the core. "No, never again. You will always be welcome in our home no matter who is there. In fact," she took a deep breath, "I'd like to invite your whole family to live in the main house with us if you're willing. There's so much space and we've come to think of you as family." Maria stepped forward, surprised. "Mrs. Thornton, Catherine, that's a significant offer." "It's not charity," Catherine clarified quickly. "It's recognition of what truly matters. Our families are connected now through the children, and Ethan needs Emma close by." Emma studied Catherine's face, possessing that uncanny ability children have to detect insincerity. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded solemnly. "I'll come. Ethan is my best friend." Relief washed over Catherine. "Thank you, Emma. Can you come today?" "Now?" "If it's all right with your mother." Maria nodded, her expression softening. "Let me help you gather your things, Emma." As Emma collected her drawings and origami creations, Catherine approached Maria. "I owe you an apology too. Your family has shown us nothing but kindness, and I repaid it with snobbery and rejection." "You were trying to protect your son," Maria said generously. "No, I was protecting my social standing." "There's a difference." Catherine shook her head ruefully. "I've spent my entire life prioritizing status and appearances. It took watching my son deteriorate to realize how empty those things are." When they arrived at the mansion, Robert was waiting anxiously in the foyer. His face broke into a relieved smile when he saw Emma. "Thank you for coming," he said, kneeling to embrace her. "Where's Ethan?" she asked. "In his room. He doesn't know you're here. We wanted it to be a surprise." They led Emma upstairs, Catherine's heart racing with anticipation and anxiety. What if too much damage had been done? What if their bond had been irreparably broken? Ethan lay in his bed, listlessly turning the pages of a book, surrounded by the origami creatures Emma had sent. When the door opened, he looked up without interest until he saw who stood there. For a moment, time seemed suspended. Then Ethan's face transformed with a joy so pure, it brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Emma!" he cried, struggling to sit up. Emma ran to him, climbing onto the bed without hesitation. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too. Look, I kept all your birds and animals." Ethan pointed to the collection arranged carefully on his nightstand. As the children reunited, speaking rapidly about everything they'd missed in each other's lives, Catherine leaned against Robert, overcome with emotion. "We almost lost this," she whispered. "But we didn't," he assured her, "and we won't make the same mistake again." True to their word, the Thorntons invited the Hayes family to move into the main house. John and Maria initially hesitated, concerned about crossing the employer-employee boundary, but Robert assured them their positions would remain secure regardless of their decision. "This isn't about work," he explained. "It's about what's best for both families." Eventually, the Hayes agreed to a compromise. They would move into the spacious guest house adjacent to the main residence, maintaining some independence while allowing the children constant access to each other. The effect on Ethan was immediate and dramatic. Within days, his appetite returned. He began participating enthusiastically in physical therapy, especially when Emma joined in, turning exercises into games. His color improved, his laughter returned, and most significantly, his medical readings began showing positive changes once again. "It's remarkable," Dr. Hoffman commented during his weekly assessment. "His muscle response has improved by 15% since Emma's return. I can't explain it medically, but I can't deny the results either." Robert nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the most powerful medicine isn't found in a laboratory. As Christmas approached, the Thornton mansion transformed. Instead of the usual professional decorators creating a picture-perfect display, the two families worked together, hanging homemade ornaments alongside priceless heirlooms. Maria taught Catherine traditional recipes, while John and Robert spent evenings by the fire, discussing everything from sports to philosophy. The holiday party that year was unlike any the Thorntons had hosted before. Instead of Greenwich's elite, they invited hospital staff, physical therapists, researchers, and other families dealing with muscular dystrophy. Children of all abilities played together in the ballroom, which had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Margaret Whitmore, hearing about the event through the grapevine, arrived uninvited, ostensibly to deliver a donation. "Catherine," she said, taking in the diverse gathering with poorly concealed disapproval. "How charitable of you to open your home like this." Catherine smiled genuinely. "It's not charity, Margaret. It's joy. Something I've only recently rediscovered." As Margaret opened her mouth to respond, Emma appeared, tugging Catherine's hand. "Catherine, Ethan wants to show everyone our dance." "We've been practicing." "Excuse me, Margaret. Duty calls." With a polite nod, Catherine allowed herself to be led away by the child who had changed everything. In the center of the ballroom, Ethan stood waiting, his posture straighter than it had been in months. When the music began, a simple Christmas carol, the two children performed a sweet, somewhat clumsy dance they had choreographed themselves. Ethan's movements were still limited by his condition, but he moved with a confidence that brought tears to the eyes of medical professionals who understood the significance. Margaret watched from the periphery, her expression shifting from disdain to thoughtfulness as she observed the obvious improvement in Ethan's condition and the genuine happiness radiating from Catherine. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the children had fallen asleep side by side beneath the Christmas tree, Robert found Catherine gazing at them. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, handing her a glass of wine. "I was just thinking about how close we came to losing everything that matters." She leaned against him. "All because I couldn't see past status and social expectations. We both made mistakes," he acknowledged. "But what matters is that we corrected them before it was too late." Catherine nodded, watching the steady rise and fall of Ethan's chest as he slept. "The doctors are amazed by his progress. Dr. Fitzgerald called it a medical anomaly. I call it a miracle," Robert said simply. "The miracle of friendship." As the new year approached, the blended household settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children spent their days together, learning and playing, while the adults discovered unexpected commonalities and new perspectives. Catherine found herself enjoying Maria's cooking lessons more than her previous charity board meetings, while Robert and John bonded over weekend fishing trips. The transformation in their lives extended beyond the personal. Robert began researching cases similar to Ethan's, where emotional well-being seemed to impact physical outcomes. He established a foundation dedicated to exploring the connection between psychological health and muscular dystrophy treatment, with Dr. Fitzgerald as the lead researcher. "We're onto something revolutionary here," Robert told Catherine one evening. "A holistic approach that considers the whole child, not just the disease." Catherine agreed, watching from the window as Emma taught Ethan to make snow angels in the garden. "They're teaching us as much as we're teaching them." But as winter melted into spring, bringing new growth and possibilities, an unexpected challenge would test their newfound unity and force them to confront the limits of conventional medicine. The reconciliation had brought healing, but the journey was far from over. Spring arrived in Connecticut with a riot of color and renewal. Cherry blossoms dotted the Thornton Estate's extensive grounds, and beds of tulips created rainbow pathways through the gardens. The changing season brought new energy to Ethan, who had continued to defy medical expectations. Under Emma's constant companionship, he progressed from hesitant steps to more confident movement, even managing short bursts of running across the lawn. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Hoffman admitted during his monthly assessment. "His muscular deterioration hasn't just slowed. In some areas, we're seeing regeneration of tissue that should be impossible with his condition." Robert leaned forward eagerly. "What does that mean for his prognosis?" The doctor chose his words carefully. "I don't want to create false hope, but if this trend continues, we may need to reconsider the timeline we originally discussed. He's responding to therapy at an unprecedented rate." Catherine squeezed Robert's hand, both of them fighting back tears of cautious optimism. They had learned not to take anything for granted, to treasure each moment of improvement as the gift it was. Life in the expanded household had settled into a pleasant rhythm. John Hayes had taken charge of the entire estate's grounds, implementing sustainable gardening practices that transformed the manicured landscape into something more natural and vibrant. Maria split her time between managing the household staff and pursuing her newfound passion for nutritional cooking, developing recipes specifically designed to support Ethan's muscle development. Catherine had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation. The society matron who once obsessed over place settings and guest lists now spent her mornings volunteering at a local children's hospital, reading stories to patients and organizing art therapy sessions inspired by Emma's creative approach with Ethan. "Mrs. Thornton," a nurse commented one day, "you have such a natural way with these children. Have you considered getting certified in child life services?" Catherine smiled, watching a young patient carefully fold an origami crane under her guidance, a skill Emma had taught her. "Actually, I have. I've been looking into programs." The changes extended to their social circle as well. Many of their former friends had drifted away, uncomfortable with the Thorntons' new priorities and household arrangement. Margaret Whitmore had publicly distanced herself, spreading thinly veiled rumors about Catherine's nervous breakdown and unusual domestic situation. But in their place came new connections, medical researchers, therapists, and most meaningfully, other families navigating the challenges of rare childhood diseases. On a perfect May afternoon, the families organized a picnic by the pond on the property. Emma and Ethan had spent the morning fishing with makeshift rods, while the adults prepared a feast that combined Maria's traditional recipes with the chef's gourmet offerings. "Watch me, Emma," Ethan called, running along the grassy bank with more coordination than he'd shown before. His cheeks were flushed with healthy color, his eyes bright with excitement. Emma applauded his progress. "You're so fast now. Race you to the big tree." Catherine watched from the picnic blanket, her heart full. "I still can't believe how far he's come. Love is powerful medicine," Maria said simply, arranging freshly baked bread in a basket. The children's laughter echoed across the water as they chased each other around the oak tree. Then suddenly the laughter stopped. Catherine looked up to see Ethan frozen in place, a strange expression crossing his face. "Mom," he called, his voice small and confused. Then his legs buckled beneath him. "Ethan!" Catherine was on her feet in an instant, running toward her son with Robert close behind. By the time they reached him, Ethan lay motionless on the grass, his breathing shallow. Emma knelt beside him, her small face contorted with fear. "He just fell down," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We were playing and he just fell." Robert gathered Ethan in his arms, racing toward the house, while Catherine called for Dr. Hoffman. Within minutes, the East Wing medical facility sprang into action. Machines beeped, medical terminology flew between professionals, and the Thorntons found themselves once again relegated to helpless observers of their son's condition. Hours passed in agonizing slow motion. Emma refused to leave, sitting silently in the hallway outside Ethan's room, methodically folding paper cranes. One for each minute that passed, Catherine realized, watching the pile grow beside the little girl. Finally, Dr. Hoffman emerged, his face grave. "We've stabilized him, but I'm concerned. This type of collapse is consistent with cardiac involvement, which can occur in advanced stages of his condition." "Advanced stages?" Robert repeated, his voice hollow. "But he's been improving." "The external improvements, his energy, mobility, even some of his blood markers, have been remarkable," the doctor acknowledged. "But the underlying disease process is complex. Sometimes the heart muscle can be affected, even when skeletal muscles appear to be strengthening." Catherine pressed her hands to her mouth. "What does this mean? What do we do?" "We've started him on cardiac support medication. I've also called in a specialist from Boston Children's Hospital who has experience with cardiac complications in muscular dystrophy patients." As night fell, Ethan remained unconscious, connected to monitors that tracked every heartbeat. Catherine and Robert maintained a vigil by his bedside, while John and Maria took turns sitting with Emma, who refused to go to bed. "She says she needs to make 1,000 paper cranes," Maria explained softly. "There's a Japanese legend that says, if you fold 1,000 cranes, your wish will be granted." Catherine nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Let her make them. Let her make 10,000 if that's what it takes." The specialist arrived near midnight, Dr. Sophia Chen, a petite woman with kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw. She reviewed Ethan's charts, examined him thoroughly, and consulted with Dr. Hoffman before addressing the anxious parents. "The good news is that we caught this early," she said. "The cardiac involvement is just beginning, and we have excellent medication protocols that can slow the progression." "But," Robert prompted, hearing the unspoken caveat. Dr. Chen sighed. "But this is a serious development. It indicates that despite the external improvements you've seen, the disease is advancing in ways we can't always detect through standard assessments." The words fell like stones in the quiet room. Catherine gripped Robert's hand so tightly her knuckles whitened. "What's our next step?" he asked, his businesslike tone belying the fear in his eyes. "We'll adjust his medication regimen and implement a specialized monitoring protocol. I'd also like to discuss enrolling Ethan in a clinical trial at Boston Children's that's showing promising results for cardiac protection in muscular dystrophy patients." The night stretched endlessly, broken only by the steady beeping of machines and the whispered consultations of medical staff. Near dawn, Catherine stepped into the hallway to stretch her legs and found Emma curled up in a chair, surrounded by hundreds of paper cranes, fighting to keep her eyes open. "Emma, sweetheart, you should get some rest," Catherine said gently. Emma shook her head stubbornly. "I have to finish the cranes." "Then Ethan will wake up." Catherine knelt beside her. "The doctors are doing everything they can." "The cranes will help too," Emma insisted with absolute conviction. "My grandma told me about a girl in Japan who was very sick, and she made 1,000 cranes and her wish came true." Rather than arguing, Catherine sat beside her and picked up a piece of paper. "Show me how to fold them properly. I want to help." By morning, the hallway was filled with colorful paper cranes, made by Emma, Catherine, Maria, and eventually the night nurses who had been touched by the child's determination. When Dr. Chen arrived to check on Ethan, she smiled at the display. "Senbazuru," she said, "the 1,000 cranes. My grandmother used to make them too." Shortly after 9, as Robert was discussing transfer options to Boston with Dr. Hoffman, a small sound came from Ethan's bed. His eyelids fluttered, then opened. "Daddy?" he murmured weakly. The room erupted in controlled medical activity as Dr. Chen and her team assessed his condition. Catherine rushed to find Emma, who had finally fallen asleep amid her paper creations. "Emma, wake up," she whispered urgently. "Ethan's awake. He's asking for you." The reunion between the children was subdued by medical necessity. Ethan remained connected to monitors, his movement restricted, but his eyes lit up when Emma entered the room carrying an armful of paper cranes. "I made these for you," she said, placing them carefully around his bed. "They're magic," Ethan smiled weakly. "They look like they're flying." "They're carrying our wishes," Emma explained seriously, "so you can get better and we can play again." Over the following days, Ethan's condition stabilized. The cardiac medication seemed to be working, and his vital signs improved steadily. Dr. Chen, impressed by his resilience, delayed the transfer to Boston in favor of continued monitoring at home. "Whatever you're doing here," she told Robert privately, "there's something special about it. His response rate is exceeding our models." One evening, as Ethan slept peacefully and the adults gathered in the kitchen for a late dinner, Dr. Chen joined them, curious about the unusual household. "I've been working with muscular dystrophy patients for 15 years, she said, accepting a cup of tea from Maria. "And I've never seen a support system quite like this one." Robert smiled tiredly. "It wasn't planned. It evolved naturally. That's often how the best healing environments develop," Dr. Chen observed. "Medicine is beginning to recognize what many cultures have always known, that healing is holistic. Physical, emotional, spiritual, they're all connected." Catherine looked thoughtfully toward the east wing where her son slept, surrounded by paper cranes and with Emma curled up in a chair beside him, having refused to return to her own bed. "Do you believe in miracles, Dr. Chen?" she asked suddenly. The doctor considered the question carefully. "I believe in science and medicine, but I've also witnessed recoveries that defy explanation, outcomes that exceed every statistical probability." She smiled. "Perhaps miracles are just scientific principles we haven't discovered yet." As May turned to June, Ethan's strength gradually returned. The terrifying cardiac episode had left its mark. A new medication regimen, more frequent monitoring, and a subdued energy that slowly brightened as the days passed. But it had also crystallized something important for the Thorntons. "We need to do more," Robert told Catherine one evening as they watched the children playing a board game. Ethan's movements were more careful now, his exuberance tempered by his close call, but his laughter remained genuine. "There are thousands of families facing what we faced, without our resources or support system." Catherine nodded, an idea that had been forming for months, finally solidifying into certainty. "I know exactly what we need to do." The summer solstice brought the year's longest day, bathing the Thornton estate in golden light that stretched into the evening hours. On the expansive back terrace, an unusual gathering had assembled. Doctors from Boston Children's Hospital, researchers from Johns Hopkins, architects, child life specialists, and families of children with rare muscular disorders. Robert stood before them, more comfortable in this role than he had been in years of corporate presentations. Thank you all for coming today. Catherine and I have invited you because each of you brings a unique perspective to a vision we believe could transform pediatric care for rare diseases. Catherine moved to stand beside her husband, the confident hostess replaced by a woman with purpose burning in her eyes. Our son's journey has taught us that medical treatment alone isn't enough. Healing happens in environments where children feel safe, loved, and engaged as whole beings, not just as patients. For the next hour, they outlined their proposal, a state-of-the-art pediatric center dedicated to rare muscular disorders, combining cutting-edge medical treatment with spaces designed specifically for children's emotional and psychological well-being. We're not just building another hospital wing, Robert explained, as digital renderings appeared on large screens. We're creating a healing community where medical care, family support, research, and quality of life converge. The architectural plans revealed a facility unlike any traditional medical building. Low-rise structures surrounded central courtyards filled with interactive gardens. Treatment rooms featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking natural landscapes. There were family apartments, communal kitchens, art studios, and play areas designed for children with varying mobility levels. The Thornton Center for Pediatric Neuromuscular Care will be built on 20 acres adjacent to Boston Children's Hospital, Catherine continued. We've already secured the land and committed the initial funding of $75 million through our foundation. Dr. Fitzgerald leaned forward, intrigued. This is ambitious, but what makes it truly different from existing specialty wings? The integration of approaches, Robert replied, and these two consultants. On cue, Ethan and Emma entered the terrace holding hands. At 5 and 8 years old, respectively, they had become inseparable partners in Ethan's ongoing recovery. Since the cardiac episode, Ethan had regained much of his strength, though he still tired more easily than before. Every aspect of the center's design will be reviewed by our expert panel of children, Catherine explained with a smile. Because who understands better what makes a medical facility feel less scary than the children themselves? Emma stepped forward with surprising confidence for her age. We want to make a place where medicine doesn't have to feel yucky or scary, where kids can have their families close and make friends who understand what they're going through. Ethan nodded enthusiastically. And where doctors listen to kids about how they feel, not just what the machines say. The simple wisdom in their statements resonated throughout the gathering. Dr. Chen, who had remained involved in Ethan's care, nodded approvingly. The psychological component of healing is finally getting the scientific attention it deserves. This center could provide valuable research opportunities. As the presentation concluded and the guests broke into discussion groups, Margaret Whitmore approached Catherine. Their relationship had remained strained since the previous winter, with only minimal contact at unavoidable social functions. "This is quite the project," Margaret said, her tone carefully neutral. "Very so unconventional." Catherine met her gaze steadily. "Yes, it is. Like our family." Margaret glanced toward Emma, who was earnestly explaining something to a group of architects. "I may have been hasty in my judgments last year. You were protecting a social order that seemed important at the time," Catherine replied without rancor. "I understand that because I once valued the same things. And now," Catherine smiled genuinely, "now I measure wealth differently." The planning phase for the Thornton Center accelerated through the summer. Robert assembled a world-class team of medical professionals, researchers, and designers. Catherine focused on the family support components, drawing from her experiences both as Ethan's mother and her volunteer work with other affected families. The Hayes family became integral to the project. John's expertise in creating therapeutic gardens led to innovative outdoor spaces, designed for both beauty and accessibility. Maria collaborated with nutritionists to develop a culinary program that would make hospital food not just healthier, but a source of comfort and joy. Most surprisingly, Emma's intuitive understanding of what brought Ethan comfort evolved into a children's advisory council, with kids from various backgrounds providing input on everything from room colors to activity programming. "It's remarkable," Dr. Chen commented one afternoon, watching Emma lead a focus group of young patients. "She has a natural gift for this work." "She always has," Catherine agreed. "We just needed to recognize it." By September, ground had been broken on the Boston site. The ceremonial first shovel was turned not by the Thorntons or hospital administrators, but by Ethan and Emma together, their small hands gripping the handle as cameras flashed. "This is for all the kids like me," Ethan said into the microphone, his voice clear and confident, "and for the friends like Emma who help us get better." The project garnered national attention, with medical journals and major news outlets covering the innovative approach. Robert was invited to speak at healthcare conferences, while Catherine found herself advocating on Capitol Hill for increased research funding for rare pediatric diseases. "Mrs. Thornton," a senator asked during one hearing, "what motivated your family to commit such substantial resources to this cause?" Catherine's answer was simple. "When conventional wisdom told us to prepare for the worst, unconventional wisdom showed us how to hope for the best. Every family deserves that chance." The autumn brought new challenges to the expanded household. Emma started third grade at Greenwich Academy, a prestigious private school that had once been the exclusive domain of families like the Thorntons. Her enrollment had raised eyebrows, but her academic performance and natural charisma quickly won over teachers and classmates alike. Ethan, now 5, began a modified kindergarten program at home, with a specialized teacher coming to the mansion 3 days a week. The other 2 days, he attended a progressive preschool for short periods, gradually increasing his time in a traditional classroom setting. His stamina is improving steadily. Dr. Hoffman reported during the monthly assessment that had become routine. And cognitively, he's operating above grade level in most areas. "That's Emma's influence," Robert said proudly. "She reads to him constantly, teaches him everything she learns at school." One crisp October evening, Catherine found Emma sitting alone on a bench in the garden, her expression unusually serious. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Catherine asked, sitting beside her. Emma looked up, her eyes troubled. "Olivia Wallace said something at school today." Catherine's heart sank. Olivia was the daughter of one of Greenwich's oldest families, and Margaret Whitmore's niece. "What did she say?" "She said I only got into Greenwich Academy because you feel sorry for me. That I'm your charity project." Emma's voice was steady, but her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. "That you and Mr. Thornton are only being nice to us because of what happened to Ethan." Catherine took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Emma, look at me." When the child's eyes met hers, she continued, "When you first came into our lives, we were the ones who needed help, not you. Ethan was suffering, and nothing we tried was working. You saved him with your kindness and friendship. If anyone should feel grateful in this relationship, it's us." "Really?" "Really. And you got into Greenwich Academy because you're brilliant and talented. Your test scores were exceptional." Emma considered this, then asked the question that clearly weighed most heavily on her mind. "If Ethan gets completely better, will you still want us around?" The innocent query pierced Catherine's heart. "Emma Hayes, you and your parents have become our family. Not employees, not charity cases, family. Nothing could ever change that." The child nodded, seemingly satisfied, but the conversation stayed with Catherine. Later that night, she discussed it with Robert and the Hayes parents over dinner after the children had gone to bed. "It was bound to happen," John said pragmatically. "Kids pick up on class differences early." "This arrangement is unusual," Maria acknowledged. "People talk and children repeat what they hear at home." Robert's expression darkened. "This is exactly the kind of narrow-minded nonsense we're trying to change with the center. The idea that kindness must have ulterior motives. We need to make something official," Catherine said suddenly. "A legal arrangement that formalizes our relationship." The others looked at her questioningly. "I've been thinking about this for a while," she continued. "What if we created a family trust that includes all of us, not as employer-employee, but as true partners? John and Maria's expertise is as valuable to the center as our financial contribution." "That's quite significant," John said carefully. "It's what's right," Robert affirmed, understanding his wife's intention immediately. "Your daughter saved our son's life. There's no employment contract that covers that." The discussion continued late into the night, addressing practical concerns and emotional complexities. By morning, the framework of a new arrangement had taken shape, one that would secure the Hayes family's future while respecting their dignity and independence. As the year progressed and winter approached once again, The Thornton Center construction advanced ahead of schedule. The first phase, an outpatient clinic and research facility, was slated to open in the spring. Families had already begun applying for the residential program that would follow. Meanwhile, Ethan continued to defy medical expectations. His cardiac function stabilized, his muscle tone improved, and his energy levels increased. Dr. Chen, during her quarterly assessment, found herself revising his prognosis yet again. "I've consulted with colleagues around the world," she told the parents. "No one has seen this pattern of improvement in this specific form of muscular dystrophy. We are documenting everything for peer review." "What does it mean?" Catherine asked, hopeful yet cautious. "It means we're witnessing something unprecedented," the doctor replied. "Whether it's the specific combination of treatments, his unique genetic profile, or the extraordinary emotional support system you've created, or most likely, all three together. Ethan is writing a new chapter in our understanding of this disease." Robert squeezed Catherine's hand. "So he could lead a normal life. I believe he has a very good chance at a much longer, more active life than we initially projected," Dr. Chen confirmed. "But I want to emphasize that what you've created here, this integrated approach to his care, must continue. It's clearly working." That evening, a light snow began falling over Greenwich, the first of the season. The families gathered in the great room, where a fire roared in the massive stone fireplace. The children, exhausted from an afternoon of winter crafts, had fallen asleep on the oversized sectional sofa, Ethan's head resting on Emma's shoulder, their hands still loosely clasped. "Look at them," Maria said softly. "So peaceful." "They've been through so much," Catherine mused, "more than children should have to endure." "But they've thrived because of it, not despite it," John observed. "They understand things about life and friendship that most adults never grasp." Robert stood by the window, watching the snow transform their world into a glistening wonderland. "We're approaching the anniversary of when everything changed," he said reflectively. "1 year since that garden party when Emma first appeared in our lives." "It feels like a lifetime ago," Catherine said. "I barely recognized the woman I was then." As they spoke, a plan began forming, a way to honor the journey they had shared and the future they were building together. A celebration not of wealth or status, but of healing, friendship, and the unexpected family they had formed across boundaries of class and circumstance. What none of them realized, as they planned this commemoration, was that fate had one more significant challenge in store, a test that would either solidify their bond forever or reveal its limitations. 5 years later. The mid-June sun cast long shadows across the expansive grounds of what was now known throughout Greenwich as the Thornton Hayes estate. The property had evolved over the years, with the guest house expanded into a comfortable residence for John and Maria, and the main mansion renovated to include spaces that reflected their shared lives, less formal, more functional, filled with warmth and personal touches. In the central garden, workers were setting up for a celebration. String lights were being hung from ancient oak trees, tables arranged on the lawn, and a small stage constructed near the spot where 6 years earlier, a little girl had offered a homemade cookie to a crying boy and changed the course of multiple lives. Ethan Thornton, now 10 years old, supervised the placement of paper lanterns along the garden pathways. Though still smaller than most boys his age, he moved with confidence and energy that belied his medical history. Regular treatments, specialized physical therapy, and the cutting-edge protocols developed at the Thornton Center had transformed his prognosis from grim to hopeful. "Mom," he called, spotting Catherine reviewing details with the event planner. "Emma thinks we should release butterflies instead of balloons. It's better for the environment." Catherine smiled at her son, marveling as she often did at the miracle of his vibrant presence. "Emma's right as usual. Let's make the change." Inside the house, Emma Hayes, now 13, sat at the kitchen island, sketching designs for the commemorative program. Her artistic talents had blossomed over the years, alongside her natural empathy and leadership abilities. Though technically the daughter of the estate's manager and housekeeper, her status in the household defied traditional definition. She was family in every way that mattered. "What do you think?" she asked Maria, who was preparing a special menu for tomorrow's event. Maria studied the sketch, an intricate design of intertwined hands forming a heart shape. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Perfect for the occasion. The occasion was the 5th anniversary of the Thornton Center for Pediatric Neuromuscular Care, which had grown from vision to reality to internationally recognized institution in half a decade. What had begun as one family's response to a personal crisis had evolved into a revolutionary approach to treating children with rare muscle disorders. Robert entered the kitchen, phone in hand, his expression simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. That was Dr. Chen. The latest research paper has been accepted for publication in the New England Journal of Medicine. The Thornton Protocol is officially entering the medical lexicon. "That's wonderful news," Catherine exclaimed, joining them. "Just in time for tomorrow's celebration." The protocol, named after their son, represented a paradigm shift in treating pediatric neuromuscular disorders, an integrated approach that combined cutting-edge medical intervention with equally rigorous attention to emotional well-being, family support, and quality of life. The results had been remarkable enough to catch the attention of the global medical community. "Emma, your contribution to the paper was specifically mentioned," Robert added proudly. "Your work with the Children's Advisory Board has changed how doctors communicate with young patients." Emma blushed at the praise. Despite her young age, she had become an integral part of the center's operations, spending weekends and summers working alongside child life specialists and helping new patients feel comfortable in the medical environment. "I just tell them what would have scared me when I was little," she said modestly. "And what would have made it better." As evening approached, the expanded family gathered for dinner, a nightly ritual that had remained constant through years of transformation. John Hayes, now the Director of Therapeutic Landscapes for the Thornton Center, discussed the latest research on horticultural therapy with Robert. Maria, who had returned to school and earned certification as a nutritional counselor, was developing specialized meal plans for children with metabolic complications of muscle disorders. Catherine, watching them all interact, reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The frightened, status-conscious woman she had been seemed like a stranger now, someone she might have pitied for her narrow understanding of what constituted a rich life. "Are you ready for your speech tomorrow?" Robert asked her as they cleared the dinner dishes together, another change from their previous life of household staff handling every domestic task. "Almost," she replied. "There's so much to say, yet words seem inadequate." "Just speak from your heart," he advised. "So that's what you do best now." Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, the adults gathered on the terrace, sharing a bottle of wine under the stars. The conversation turned to the upcoming celebration and the hundreds of guests expected. Medical professionals, patient families, donors, and community supporters. Margaret Whitmore RSVP'd, Catherine mentioned casually. "That was unexpected." "People change," Maria said generously. "Some just take longer than others." John raised his glass. "To second chances and new beginnings. And to whatever comes next," Robert added with a meaningful glance at his wife. The whatever comes next was a significant expansion of the Thornton Center, a new research wing dedicated exclusively to developing gene therapies for rare muscular disorders. The plans were nearly finalized, with groundbreaking scheduled for the fall. The following day dawned clear and perfect. By noon, the estate had transformed into a festival atmosphere. Children in wheelchairs raced along accessible paths through the gardens. Families who had bonded in hospital waiting rooms embraced like old friends. Medical professionals who had initially been skeptical of the Thornton approach mingled with its most ardent supporters. Near the refreshment tables, Ethan was surrounded by a group of younger children, all patients from the center. He demonstrated a series of stretching exercises that had been developed specifically for his condition, adapted to each child's abilities. "The secret is to do them every day, even when you don't feel like it," he explained with the seriousness of someone who had learned this lesson through experience. "And having a friend to remind you helps a lot." At that moment, Emma appeared with a tray of the special cookies that had become legendary in the center's family support program, Maria's recipe, now baked by various families as a symbol of the care that went beyond medical treatment. "Cookies made with love," she announced. echoing the words she had spoken to Ethan years ago. They have healing powers. Catherine, watching from a distance, felt her eyes fill with tears. The children who had brought them together had grown so much, not just physically but in wisdom and purpose. Ethan's condition, while still requiring regular treatment, had stabilized to a degree that defied all initial prognoses. Emma had developed into a compassionate young leader whose insight guided many aspects of the center's patient experience. As the formal program began, Robert took the stage, welcoming the assembled guests and recognizing key contributors to the center's success. Catherine joined him for the announcement of the new research wing, which would bear the names of both families, the Thornton Hayes Institute for Genetic Research. When we began this journey, Catherine told the crowd, we were a family in crisis, facing what seemed like an insurmountable challenge. What we discovered along the way is that healing comes in many forms through many channels, and often from the most unexpected sources. She gestured toward Emma and Ethan, who sat in the front row. A child's wisdom, a friend's loyalty, a cookie offered in simple kindness. These things cannot be measured by medical instruments, yet their power to heal is undeniable. The audience listened intently as Catherine continued. The Thornton Center was built on a simple premise, that treating the whole child and body, mind and spirit, creates possibilities that conventional medicine alone cannot achieve. What began as a mother's desperate hope has become a new standard of care that is changing lives around the world. After the speeches and presentations, a special moment had been planned. Ethan and Emma led everyone to the exact spot where they had first met. There, a small marble bench had been installed, inscribed with words that had become the center's unofficial motto, "Healing happens heart to heart." As the children unveiled the bench, a young girl stepped forward from the crowd. 7-year-old Lily Anderson had been the first patient admitted to the center's residential program, with the same form of muscular dystrophy that had affected Ethan. Like him, she had responded remarkably well to the integrated treatment approach. "I have something for you," she said shyly, holding out a carefully folded paper crane. "Emma taught me how to make them when I was scared about my treatment." Ethan accepted the crane with a smile of recognition. "They work, you know. They really do carry wishes." As the celebration continued into the evening, Catherine found herself approached by Margaret Whitmore. The years had softened the woman's sharp edges, or perhaps life had taught her lessons of her own. "Catherine," she began awkwardly, "I owe you an apology. What you've created here, it's extraordinary. I was wrong to judge your choices." Catherine smiled genuinely. "Thank you, Margaret. It means a lot to hear you say that. Your son looks wonderful," Margaret continued. "And that Hayes girl, Emma, she's quite remarkable." "Yes, she is," Catherine agreed. "They both are." As darkness fell, lanterns illuminated the gardens, creating a magical atmosphere. The children organized a game that wound through the property, inclusive of all abilities and ages. Watching them, Catherine felt a profound sense of rightness, as if all the pieces of a complex puzzle had finally fallen into place. Robert joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Penny for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about how a cookie changed our lives," she said softly. "One small act of kindness that set everything else in motion." They watched as Emma helped a younger child in a wheelchair navigate a garden path, while Ethan ran ahead, placing glowing stones to mark the route. The friendship that had begun on this spot had deepened over the years into something familial and enduring. The new genetic therapy program could change everything, Robert mused. Not just for Ethan, but for thousands of children with conditions like his. "We've already changed everything," Catherine replied. "Not by curing the disease, but by changing how we live with it." As the evening drew to a close, the families gathered around a bonfire. John and Maria Hayes sat with Robert and Catherine, their initially cautious employer-employee relationship long since evolved into deep friendship and partnership. The children, exhausted from the day's excitement, leaned against each other, Ethan's head on Emma's shoulder just as it had been that first afternoon. "We should make this an annual tradition," Robert suggested. "A reminder of where we started and how far we've come." "And how far we still have to go," John added, ever practical. Maria smiled, watching the flames. "That's the beauty of it, isn't it? There's always further to go, more to learn, more to build together." Catherine nodded, looking around at the gathered community. families whose lives had been touched by the center, medical professionals whose perspectives had been transformed, and at the center of it all, two children who had taught them all what truly mattered. From crisis to purpose, she said softly. That's been our journey.